This is R2D Tech, and this week's video is on the iMac 24-inch, so stay tuned. So Apple just recently showed off this new computer, and it has the new M1 chip, which is probably what excites me the most. Apart from that though, I'm also excited about the new color selection. So it comes in 7 colors, one of which is not black, unfortunately. I don't know why they didn't include that as one of the options, but 7 colors is a really nice selection to have. More on the topic of design, it looks like it's going to be made of aluminium, which is quite typical of Apple products, but it does seem a bit outdated in terms of how large the bezels are around the side, and especially the bottom bezel, which is pretty large, like this big. Personally, this doesn't really bother me at all, especially on a desktop system. And the color selection really does make up for it, along with the fact that the computer is so thin and futuristic in that sense. The stand also looks pretty impressive, and you can swivel the display forwards or backwards to change your viewing angle, so they really have thought about this quite nicely. If I were to describe the design in one word, I'd probably say minimalistic, just because it is very basic in a good sense, or at least in my opinion, that's a good thing. And it's very airy, lightweight looking, and there's not too many buttons here and there. There's like the power button on the back, and that's pretty much it. Adding to that whole minimalist theme, it seems they've gone this route with the ports as well. So as far as I can tell, all you get is a headphone jack on the side, along with 2 Thunderbolt ports on the back and 2 USB 3 ports as well. For a desktop system, this is very limited, but on the other hand, since this device is going to be on your desk the whole time, it's not such a big deal, since you can plug in an adapter into any of those ports and add all sorts like SD card readers, HDMI inputs, and whatever you want really, since you're not going to be having to move this around a lot. The 2 main selling features, in my opinion, apart from the design, which as I said before, I'm a huge fan of, are the M1 chip and the display itself. So as we've seen on the M1 MacBooks, which have been out for quite some time now, these chips are really impressive, especially in terms of efficiency. Because of those positive outcomes that we got from the initial tests of the M1 on the MacBooks, I would fully expect this system to be able to do many tasks, or at least a whole range of tasks, which are quite CPU intensive. If you haven't already seen, the M1 seemed to have been really capable of tasks like video editing or equivalent style tasks, especially if they're not too graphic intensive. So if you're just a casual designer, or you do a lot of video editing or anything like that, then this could be the product for you if you're looking for a desktop system. I will say though that from experience from a couple of people I know who do have the M1 MacBooks, in terms of gaming, so really intense graphics, it's good, but it's not the best. So if that's you, if you're a really intensive gamer and you're looking for something to do that sort of task on, then this might not be the product for you. Of course though, I would assume that if you are looking for something that intensive in terms of graphics, then you're probably not going for a product like this. You're probably looking for something slightly more expensive, maybe a custom build or something like that. So that's the M1 part. Of course, we've skipped the whole battery thing, which we normally mention on laptops, because this is a really efficient chip, because obviously this is a desktop and it's going to be plugged in the whole time. One last thing to add on that front is that you can choose between 2 models of the M1 chipset, one which will have an 8-core CPU and a 7-core GPU, or another which will have an 8-core CPU and an 8-core GPU. So if you are looking for slightly better graphics, but obviously nothing too crazy, then you'll probably go for the slightly more expensive 8-core GPU model. Moving on to the display, which is obviously very important on a product like this, you get a fairly large 24-inch display, and it's a resolution of 4480 by 2520 pixels. And that puts you at a pixels per inch of 218. That's not the highest pixel density we've seen, but it does come out as 4.5K, so that is still pretty impressive. In terms of brightness, the display goes up to 500 nits, which perhaps could have been slightly higher. Of course, I haven't seen it in person yet, so I can't be too judgmental. And it has been the case in the past with Apple products where the on-paper specs might be slightly lower than other products out there, but when you see it in person, you really can't tell the difference. Now onto a couple of specs. On the 7-core GPU model, which is the base model, you can choose the base 256GB of SSD storage, or you can configure it up to 512 or 1TB of storage. Whereas on the 8-core GPU model, you can either get the base 256GB of SSD, or you can get 512 or 1TB, or you can even go up to 2TB of SSD on this model, which is obviously quite a lot more. Personally, I wouldn't choose the model based on the storage cap, because the cap of 1TB on the base model is still really high, and if you need more, you can always connect an external drive or even use cloud storage. I think it's more important to choose the model based on how many GPU cores you want. You'll be happy to know though that regardless of which model you choose, you can get the same amount of memory. Of course, memory is quite important even just for the casual daily user, especially if you're going to be running a lot of data in Excel or running any packages or softwares, which can be quite memory intensive as well. The base will be 8GB, but you can actually configure it up to 16. I would personally go for the 16 just because I use a lot of software packages in engineering, but if you're just going to be using like Word or surfing the web or anything like that, then you could probably get away with the 8GB. Now, the webcam is now 1080p, which is a nice upgrade from some of the older Macs which had 720p cams, which quite frankly were pretty rubbish. In addition to this, they do say that they have some M1 chip signal processing, which somehow enhances the images even more, probably using some algorithms, but I wouldn't rely on that too much. I'd just say you're getting 1080p resolution, and that should be perfectly fine for any sort of Zoom meetings or something like that. But if you want to, you can always attach like a camera, DSLR, whatever, and stream through that as well. Paired with this, you also get a 3-mic array, which from experience is pretty good on Macs anyway, and it's supposed to be studio quality. I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely pretty decent. And on a slightly related note, you also should get a pretty decent speaker system built in, but since this is going to be a desktop setup anyway, I personally would just have some external speakers and maybe a subwoofer or something as well, just to enhance that whole audio experience. Now, in terms of the actual accessories that you get in the box, they have provided the power brick, which is nice to see. They obviously stopped doing that with their iPhones, but it's probably more important with a desktop system that you do have a power brick. And they also give you a 2-meter power cord, which is pretty decent. Along with this, you also get a USB-C to Lightning cable, because of course their other products like the iPhone still use Lightning, unfortunately.
Insanity. Yeah, no, that would be irresponsible.
Regardless of which model you choose, you'll get a Magic Mouse in the box, but then the keyboard is where it starts to differ slightly. If you get the base model, you'll just get a standard Magic Keyboard, which is still really nice, whereas if you get the upgraded model, you do get a new Magic Keyboard which has Touch ID on it as well. This is a pretty nice feature to have, but it does err on the side of being a bit gimmicky. I certainly wouldn't choose the upgraded model just because of this feature, and to be honest, you can probably just buy the keyboard with Touch ID in the future if you really want it. One thing to keep in mind as well is that if you do have an Apple Watch, you can always just use that to unlock your computer instantly without having to do any Touch ID or anything like that. That's it for the sort of initial thoughts and specs which I thought were worth mentioning in this video. Now, the last thing of course to talk about is price. If you're looking to get the 7-core GPU model, then this will start at £1,249 and something equivalent in US dollars. Whereas if you do want the upgraded 8-core GPU model, then this will start at £1,449. Of course, if you choose to add extra configurations like upgrading the storage or the RAM or anything like that, then you will start to ramp the price up quite a lot. Overall, this does look like a really nice, well-polished product and something which is quite a nice addition to the Apple lineup. That's it for this week though. If you liked the video, then please leave a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, then definitely smash that subscribe button and notification bell below.